Stop what you are doing and look at the map of North America. Really look at it. For over a century, that map represented the single most stable economic fortress on the face of the earth. An integrated, unbreakable spine of democracy, trade, and shared defense running from the Arctic Circle down to the Rio Grande. It was the envy of the world. It was the bedrock of American power. And as of this week, that bedrock has cracked. We are not just reporting on a trade deal tonight. We are performing an autopsy on the American century. What happened in Beijing over the last 48 hours is not merely a diplomatic summit. It is a geopolitical crime scene. And the suspect, the man who handed the keys to the continent over to the Chinese Communist Party, is the same man who claims to be the savior of American industry, Donald Trump. We are witnessing the complete systemic collapse of United States hegemony in our own hemisphere. While the American media is distracted by the circus, by the noise, by the daily outrage cycle, the actual architecture of the global order has shifted beneath our feet. Canada, our closest ally, our sibling nation, the country with whom we share the longest undefended border in the world, has just signaled the end of the exclusive American partnership. They have pivoted, and they haven't just pivoted away from Washington. They have pivoted directly into the waiting strategic arms of Xi Jinping. Let's be precise about what has occurred, because the details matter. This is forensic. Prime Minister Carney didn't just go to China for a photo op. He went there to finalize a fundamental restructuring of the Canadian economy that cuts the United States out of the equation. We are talking about a trillion-dollar pivot. The headline is the trade pact, but the subtext is the death of the Monroe Doctrine. For 200 years, the policy of the United States has been that the Western Hemisphere is off limits to foreign powers. That doctrine is now dead, killed not by a foreign invasion, but by domestic incompetence and the isolationist arrogance of the MAGA regime. Here is the evidence. While Donald Trump was busy rambling about being the Tariff King, threatening to tax our allies into submission, and floating the delusional, narcissistic fantasy of buying Greenland, the Canadian government was engaging in realpolitik. They looked at the chaos in Washington, they looked at the instability of a potential second Trump term, and they made a calculation. They calculated that the United States is no longer a reliable partner. They calculated that America is a sinking ship of unpredictability, so they built a life raft with Beijing. The specifics of this agreement should send a chill down the spine of every auto worker in Michigan, every energy worker in Pennsylvania, and every strategist at the Pentagon. Canada has agreed to pull back tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. They are opening the floodgates. 49,000 Chinese EVs, highly advanced, heavily subsidized, and significantly cheaper than American counterparts, will now flow into the Canadian market at a most favored nation tariff rate. This is a dagger to the heart of the American auto industry. The entire premise of the North American auto sector is integration. Parts cross the border 7 times before a car is finished. By allowing Chinese vehicles a foothold in North America, Canada is effectively bypassing the fortress walls that the United States has tried to erect. But it gets worse. This isn't just about cars, it's about energy dominance. The agreement outlines significant Chinese investment in Canadian liquefied natural gas, LNG. By 2030, Canada aims to produce 50 million tons of LNG, and where is it going? It is not coming south to power American homes or American factories. It is destined for Asia. It is destined to fuel the industrial rise of our primary global adversary. Donald Trump has spent years screaming about energy independence, yet his diplomatic malpractice has pushed Canadian energy reserves, one of the largest on the planet, directly into the Chinese supply chain. We are watching the resource wealth of North America being siphoned off to the east because Washington decided that bullying its friends was a smart negotiating tactic. This is the consequence of the America First doctrine. When you treat your allies like vassals, when you threaten them with tariffs, when you insult their leaders and destabilize their economies, they don't just sit there and take it. They find new friends. Donald Trump operates under the primitive, gangster-like assumption that the United States is the only game in town. He believes he can abuse Canada, threaten Mexico, and abandon Europe, and they will have no choice but to come crawling back. He is wrong. The world is big, and China is patient. Beijing watched Trump burn bridges with Ottawa, and they quietly, methodically built a superhighway over the ashes. The phrase used by Prime Minister Carney in Beijing was New World Order. Now, the conspiracy theorist in the MAGA swamp will hear that and lose their minds, spinning tales of shadowy elites. But in the language of international relations, Carney is saying something much more terrifyingly simple. He is saying that the post-World War II order, the system built by the United States, for the United States, guaranteed by American economic and military might, is over. He is stating, as a matter of fact, that the unilateral dominance of Washington is finished. The New World Order he describes is a multipolar reality where countries like Canada hedge their bets. They will trade with the U.S., sure, but they will no longer be dependent on the U.S. They are diversifying their portfolio to survive the volatility of American extremism. Let's analyze the contrast, because it is stark and it is damning. On one side of the Pacific, you have Prime Minister Carney engaging in high-level, meticulous statecraft. He is navigating a complex relationship with a superpower, securing investments, opening markets for Canadian canola, and positioning his nation as a bridge between East and West. It is serious, it is adult, it is strategic. On the other side, you have Donald Trump, a man who stands at a podium and declares, "I am the Tariff King," like a toddler wearing a paper crown. He boasts about threatening Germany. He boasts about the idea of imposing tariffs on countries that don't support his fantasy of invading Greenland. This is not foreign policy. This is clinical delusion manifesting as national strategy. When Trump talks about Greenland, he treats sovereign nations like real estate listings. We need it for national security, he says, as if he can just eminent domain an entire country. And when he doesn't get what he wants, he threatens economic violence. I may put a tariff on them, he says. This is the language of a protection racket, not a presidency. The tragedy is that this protection racket is bankrupting the country's credibility. Trump thinks tariffs are a sign of strength. He thinks that by taxing imports, he is punishing foreign nations. But any economist, any historian, anyone with a basic grasp of how money works, knows that tariffs are taxes on American consumers. But beyond the economics, the geopolitical cost is incalculable. Trump weaponized tariffs against Canada, our closest friend. He cited national security to put tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. Think about the insanity of that. Canada, a national security threat. It was an insult that Ottawa never forgot. And now, we are paying the price for that insult. The United States is currently sleepwalking into isolation. We are becoming a pariah in our own neighborhood. While Trump fantasizes about being the dominant predator of the Western Hemisphere, Canada is proving that the ecosystem has moved on. The predator is starving because the prey has learned to migrate. This deal between Ottawa and Beijing is a signal flare. It tells the rest of the world, it tells Europe, South America, Africa, that you don't need Washington anymore. You can cut a deal with China, you can bypass the chaos, you can ignore the threats. We have to understand the legal and constitutional dereliction of duty here. The President of the United States is sworn to protect the nation. That protection includes securing our economic future and maintaining our alliances. By actively dismantling the NATO alliance structure, by attacking the G7 framework, and by alienating our North American partners, Trump is committing a form of diplomatic treason. He is rendering the United States vulnerable. If Canada is integrated with Chinese technology, Chinese energy infrastructure, and Chinese digital systems, the North American security perimeter is breached. The firewall is gone. This is what happens when you elect a demolition expert to be the architect of your foreign policy. He has taken a sledgehammer to the pillars of the West, and now, as the dust settles, we see the new structure rising. It is a structure where the United States is isolated, angry, and shrinking, while China expands its influence right up to the 49th parallel. The panic inside the American intelligence community must be palpable. They know what this means. This isn't just about losing market share, it's about losing leverage. When the next global crisis hits, when we need Canada's support, when we need a unified North American front, it won't be there. Ottawa will have to check with Beijing first. They will have economic entanglements that prevent them from standing fully with the United States. We have forced them into a position of neutrality, or worse, complicity with our rival. And look at the timing. This happens precisely as Trump is trying to claim dominion over Venezuela, trying to prop up authoritarian proxies, trying to act like an emperor. He is grasping for control in South America while losing the bedrock of North America. It is a strategic failure of historic proportions. He is chasing ghosts in Greenland and dictators in Caracas, while the real game is being played in Toronto and Shanghai. We are watching the magnification of American diplomacy, which is to say, the total corrosion of trust. No country looks at the United States today and sees a rock. They see a fault line. They see a country tearing itself apart, led by a movement that rejects the very concept of international cooperation. Carney's move is a rational response to an irrational America. If your neighbor's house is on fire and the owner is standing on the lawn screaming at the firefighters, you build a fireproof wall. That is what Canada just did. They built a firewall against American insanity, and they used Chinese bricks to do it. The implications for the American worker are devastating. We are talking about a future where North America is flooded with affordable, high-tech Chinese goods that enter through the Canadian backdoor, bypassing American tariffs. Trump can scream America first all he wants, but the market will follow the path of least resistance. If Canada becomes the hub for Chinese manufacturing and logistics in the West, the American Rust Belt will turn into an industrial graveyard. We are looking at the permanent deindustrialization of the Midwest, not because of globalism, but because of Trump's failed isolationism. This is the autopsy. The patient, American hegemony, didn't die of natural causes. It was suffocated. It was strangled by a policy that mistook arrogance for strength and cruelty for leverage. We are now living in the world that Trump built. A lonely, angry America, surrounded by former friends who have decided that they can do better elsewhere. The map has changed. The silence you hear is the sound of the world turning its back on Washington. And unless we wake up to the severity of this fracture, we are going to find ourselves alone in a world that we used to lead. This is not a drill. This is the new reality, and it demands that we stay vigilant. We cannot afford to look away. If you want to understand the forces dismantling your future, you have to look past the headlines and read the fine print of these treaties. You have to join the ranks of those who are willing to face the hard, cold truth. This is why we do this work, to shine a light on the cracks before the whole house comes down. Stay with us. We are just getting started. Enter through the Canadian backdoor. That is the new geopolitical reality. While Donald Trump stands at the podium screaming America first and proclaiming himself the Tariff King, the global market has quietly routed around him. The autopsy of American economic dominance reveals a self-inflicted wound, a severed artery in the northern border that is bleeding out the prosperity of the American Midwest. This is not a negotiation tactic. This is the domestic implosion of our industrial future. Trump's tariff lie was simple. He told you that taxing imports would force the world to bend the knee. He lied. Markets do not bend to bullies. They follow the path of least resistance. And that path now flows directly from Beijing to Ottawa, bypassing Washington entirely. Prime Minister Carney's trillion-dollar pact with China, bringing in 49,000 electric vehicles, securing massive LNG exports to Asia, and pivoting the entire Canadian agricultural sector toward the east, is the forensic proof of Trump's failure. While Trump plays make-believe Emperor of Venezuela, ranting about Maria Corina Machado and stealing Nobel Peace Prizes in his mind, Canada is meticulously constructing a new trade architecture that renders the United States irrelevant. If Canada becomes the primary hub for Chinese manufacturing and logistics in the West, the American Rust Belt turns into an industrial graveyard. The North American auto sector is a singular, integrated organism. You cannot sever the Canadian limb without killing the American body. When affordable, high-tech Chinese EVs flood the Canadian market, creating a new standard of efficiency and cost under $35,000, the factories in Michigan and Ohio will not just struggle, they will cease to exist. We are staring at the permanent deindustrialization of the Midwest, not because of globalism, but because of a failed isolationism that mistook cruelty for leverage. And this is where the moral mandate for resistance becomes absolute. Look at what is happening on the ground in Alberta. The resistance led by figures like Charlie Angus and the Midas Canada movement is not just a political disagreement. It is an existential fight for the survival of democratic norms against the contagion of MAGA extremism. They are building a moat. They are organizing recalls. They are deciding that if the United States is going to commit economic and moral suicide, they will not be dragged down with the corpse. This is the wake-up call. The world is not waiting for America to regain its sanity. They are building a new world order. Carney's words, not mine, defined by competence, multilateralism, and the exclusion of a chaotic, unreliable America. Trump has not made us strong. He has made us solitary. He has fenced us into a burning building and called it a fortress. The silence you hear from our former allies is not submission. It is the sound of them locking the door and walking away. We are witnessing the dismantling of the American century, sold off for the cheap applause of a rally crowd, leaving us alone in a world we used to lead. This is not a drill. It is the verdict.